Hello, everyone, and welcome to another series of Foundry virtual events. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and I hope everyone's doing super well today. My name is Joyce. I'm the Field Marketing Manager for Foundry EMEA, and I'm here with my colleague Jordan, Director of Product and Pre-Production for Look Dev and Lighting Foundry. Before we dive into the Pixar team session, I just wanted to share a few updates with you guys. So we have 13 on-demand webinars available now, so make sure you check those out. And for more information on where they're hosted, you can go onto our website, foundry.com/events. For any questions, any feedback, or if you want to participate in Foundry virtual events, you can send us an email on virtual.events@foundry.com. We've got 2 upcoming webinars coming up. So next week, we've got CG Supervisor Roundtable, May 28th, so make sure you tune into those. And we also have another one on June the 2nd with Jan Berda from Macavision. We have more listings coming up as well end of this week, so keep an eye out on our website. So keep up to date on our social media channels on any trends and insights in the industry. And you can also sign up in our Insights Hub as well, where we have a lot of content on learnings and articles and case studies as well. So speaking of content, we've got some really cool content for Katana available on Insights Hub for you. So we've got some cool case studies ready on Katana usage for rodeo effects and method studios. We also have an artist spotlight on Rain Anderson, so make sure you tune into those as well. We also have some learning materials for Katana as well on our learning section in our Insights Hub. I also just want to give a massive shout out to all of our industry partners. If you're not supporting them already, please make sure you do so now. Access VFX, ASWF, ACM SIGGRAPH, and VES. So make sure you share the love with them as well. We're hiring as well, so we're looking for 2 categories of candidates, one being more in the engineering background and one more in the artistic background. For more information on these job roles, you can check out our careers page on foundry.com/careers. Lastly, I just want to say a massive thank you to all of the customers, studios that have so far presented for us on Foundry virtual events. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, your journeys, your experiences. It's an incredible amount of stuff that we can all take in and soak in as well. So thank you all for sharing your experiences. And I'm looking forward to building up the slide with many more logos coming soon. That's it for me. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'm going to hand over to Jordan.
All right. Thank you for joining us, everybody. I hope wherever in the world you are, whatever time of day it is, you are happy, healthy, and safe. So Katana 3.6, it is done. It is dusted. It is just getting prepped for the marketing website, and then it'll be in everybody's hands. If you're a Katana customer and you want to grab it before the marketing website update is done, just reach out and let us know. Happy to send you the links. What are the highlights of this one? Well, we've introduced a new snapping workflow built on top of Hydra, and we've got the new network material edit and a few other bits and pieces in there that add up to a nice, tidy release that we're quite proud of. I think summer will have some videos that actually even use some of the features in Katana 3.6. But it is a great pleasure of ours to have Tim and Sarah from the RenderMan and Pixar teams here to present for you guys about Onward and to also talk about all the work that goes into RenderMan and has gone into RenderMan 23 specifically around Katana. And please stick around for the Q&A. You've got basically direct access to people I don't think you would normally meet outside of a show like FMX or SIGGRAPH. So this is a fantastic opportunity to ask questions and get answers directly from the people that are doing some of the heavy lifting in the business. Anyways, without further ado, let's turn it over to Tim and the story of Onward.
Hi, sorry, trying to get my setup working here. So, hi from California. Hopefully everyone can see this. And thanks for having me. I'm Tim Best. I was the technical lighting supervisor for Onward. Today I'll talk briefly about how Pixar lighting artists use Onward, or use Katana and RenderMan to craft the imagery of Onward. To start, I'll talk about how the technical challenges of Onward differed from some past Pixar films. Then I'll talk a little bit about our lighting process, and I'll also briefly touch on some of the newer technology that we use for Onward. I hope that everybody out there, wherever you are, has had a chance to see the film. If not, it's now available for streaming on Disney+. So I've been with Pixar for just under 20 years. It'll be 20 years in September, and I've worked on a bunch of films, and both as a lighting artist and then more recently as a technical lead and supervisor. These films have often had a single standout technical challenge, which is exemplified by two other projects that I helped to supervise the lighting for, Coco and The Good Dinosaur. The Good Dinosaur, now available on Disney+. So on The Good Dinosaur, we had this giant world of naturalistic vegetation, which meant lots and lots of heavy detailed geometry. So then here, the big core problem was primarily one of complexity management, dealing with the film's vegetation and sets. We had to make sure that lighters had controls to see the detail that they needed to address notes and light their shots, but also to ensure that interactive workflows remained efficient. Then there was Coco, also available to stream on Disney+. On Coco, we had to realize Lee Unkrich and Adrian Molina's vision for the world of the dead, which meant, among other challenges, managing not only dense, detailed sets, but a sheer quantity of lights that was an order of magnitude greater than we'd ever dealt with before. Guess how many lights? I'll pause here to give you a moment to consider your answer. Time's up. Were you right? Were you correct? Are you skeptical or incredulous? To anyone out there who is skeptical about that number, know that I respect your skepticism deeply and truly, for reals. And so I included this extra slide, which is a desktop capture of me examining a point cloud representation of the light sources in a Coco shot. Unlike The Good Dinosaur and Coco, Onward had no one single standout, crack this problem and all the other stuff will fall into place type challenge. Instead, it just had lots and lots of challenges. Individually, they seemed manageable. However, tackling them all simultaneously with a short calendar while maintaining a high quality bar and not blowing up the budget was an intimidating prospect. The technical challenges of Onward break down that way, in part because it's a road or traveling movie with a lot of stuff. A lot of locations, a lot of characters, and also a lot of magic effects. Additionally, the film's lighting changes as the story moves from the familiar to the fantastic. What starts as a quotidian, less than happy teenage birthday quickly turns into an epic adventure. And as that happens, the film's images become more dynamic too. There's more saturated color and contrast. If we zoom out and look at the film as a whole, we can see that change and also notice how themes of familiarity and fantasy and Ian's emotional arc, Ian being the main character, are supported with color. This is a tableau from the first frame of every shot in the film. We first meet Ian and Barley at home on a typical morning. Well, it's typical aside from it being Ian's birthday. These are lighting studies, paintings done in Photoshop by Sharon Callahan, Onward's director of photography and lighting. She was my boss. These are examples of reference provided to lighting artists. The lighting artists use these paintings along with other reference material to craft the lighting for individual shots like this one. Dan Scanlon, Onward's director, really wanted comedic moments like this one to read clearly. So this sequence was lit with a bright, warm morning light and open shadows. That way, we all really appreciate the scene of a centaur moving through this small, cluttered suburban kitchen, truly a juxtaposition of the fantastic and mundane. Onward was lit with Katana, rendered with RenderMan, and composited with Nuke. Our lighters work with a physically based lighting model and many tools that are analogous to those that a gaffer and cinematographer might use on a live action movie set. However, the look of Onward isn't strictly photorealistic. It's believable, but the lighting is often softer and more painterly than photographic. Achieving this sort of look can actually be more challenging to the lighting artists than photorealism. Each shot must potentially be carefully handcrafted. I'll try to show you what I mean. Here's an example of a shot from Onward. This is when Ian and Barley have pulled off the highway at night on their journey and are having a falling out and sort of an argument at a rest stop. If we back the camera up just a little bit and make the light sources visible to the camera, we can see how the lighting artist has staged the lighting for this shot, supplementing the practical lights with extra lights set up for this specific camera angle. This looks very similar to what you might see on a live action movie set. Here's another example. This is when Ian and Barley run into, and afoul of, a gang of motorcycle riding sprites at a gas station. So here's the same trick. If we back the camera up a bit and make the light sources visible, in this shot, we'll see that it's more clear that we're cheating physics. That is, doing things that one can't do in live action. For example, most of the supplemental lights are exclusively linked on or off of specific objects. This reflects, no pun intended, a pretty good description of our lighting philosophy in general. We start with a physically based model, then we cheat. The biggest technology change for lighting on Onward was to switch to RenderMan version 22. We've had live rendering with RenderMan and Katana at the studio since Finding Dory. However, with R22, it was faster, more stable, and supported workflows that had previously required starting a new live render, like changing light linking. And that's super important on a show with a painterly look, where there's a lot of art-directed versus physically motivated, shot-specific lighting work. It was also hugely impactful in that this speed-up affected everything across the show. It wasn't a win that was limited to one location or effect or character. Again, Onward had no single big boss problem, just lots and lots of stuff. And by the way, this playback is sped up. I can't really work this fast. This was an early test, a desktop recording running an R22 live render through some workflow tasks. Onward obviously had lots of magic effects, with each spell having its own unique look. A new technology that we used for the film was a new volumetric mesh light for magic effects like the beam from Ian's wizard staff. We could use the effects assets as light sources directly without needing any kind of additional extra proxy representation of volume-based effects in the asset, like a meshed version or point cloud to use for interactive lighting. Here's an early test image with a scene lit only by the volume effect. In our tests, the volume light provided a lot of nice, sharp color detail in fog render passes. It just wasn't there when we used other kinds of proxies. And it was fast, too. In our tests, renders with the volume light ran faster than renders using a geometric mesh light, or based on a surface. This is probably in part because representing the complex, irregular shape of the volumetric beam effects as a surface can end up creating a lot of heavy geometry, a really dense mesh. Interactive lighting could be tweaked by dropping a material override node into the graph to tune the volume shader, or by using any of our available light filters, like barns or rods on the light. And all of these workflows worked with R22 live rendering. Here's the final shot from the film. However, even with that fine level of control, lighting artists would supplement the volume lights with other lights to hit specific DP or director notes. Again, we start with physically correct, and then we cheat. This is a breakdown of render layers in this shot. For Onward, we also reworked parts of the practical lighting system used for Coco to accommodate crowds of cars with complex detailed lighting rigs. We use a piece of software called Bakelite, which was originally written for Cars 3 by Tim Bath. With our updates for Onward, lighters could control the distribution of car headlight colors or change the colors without having to request upstream asset changes or de-instancing crowd models. Instancing is one of the methods used to keep complex scenes like this one as lightweight as possible. And in Katana, large groups of lights can be represented by a single fully editable master. Our term for this is a light array. Our procedural light generation code ran during our nightly shot conversion or pose caching process. It walked a USD scene and generated lightweight data that our Katana side lighting tools could consume. For Onward, this provided us with some powerful hooks for complexity management. Just like with the Good Dinosaur and Coco, our goal was to present the lighting artists with intuitive access to the controls that they need, but not such a huge set of controls that they would get lost or be overwhelmed. This shot uses all three of those technologies. Light arrays of the new volumetric mesh lights for the light cast into the scene from the volumetric fire effects, and obviously RenderMan 22. The fire effects in this sequence were designed to be modular so that they could be dressed or moved around per shot to hit specific compositional notes in the storyboards. This approach, combined with our light array workflow, also streamlined the setup work. The interactive lighting rigs for the effects assets could be built right into the assets with minimal weight and overhead, but still present the lighting artists with an optimal set of controls. Also, rather than trying to describe what's happening in this shot, since like objectively there's a lot going on, I'll just remind you that you can find out for yourself by streaming Onward, now available on Disney+. So, despite myriad challenges, artists were able to craft a unique, memorable, poignant, and beautiful film. Technically, the lighting department operated efficiently, and all in all, in lighting, things went pretty smoothly, which isn't to say it wasn't shot. I want to quickly, specifically thank Jonathan Pitko and Jordan Rempel, who were also lighting supervisors on the film and who contributed material to this presentation. Thank you to everyone for tuning in, and stay safe. And with that, I think I can turn it over to Sarah.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Tim. It's always super fun to see RenderMan for Katana in action. So here I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So I'm a developer for RenderMan for Katana, and I've been working on that for about 5 years now. So I'm going to give a brief overview of RenderMan and some demos of RenderMan for Katana in action. So for some context, RenderMan is used at Pixar as the in-house renderer, but it's also used on many more films than just Pixar's. Of course, RenderMan helped to define early visual effects on some of these memorable films. The original creators of RenderMan, Ed Catmull, Lauren Carpenter, and Rob Cook even were honored with an Academy Award for their work. But since then, RenderMan has changed a lot. We're a path tracer now, like the industry is all. And here's some more of the more recent movies that have used RenderMan. Onward was the first Pixar movie to use RenderMan 22. What that meant was a lot of big changes and improvements. We added a lot of features to improve performance, to make RenderMan faster and more memory efficient. On top of that, it was mostly a focus on getting what we call always-on rendering, which is how we can, the goal is to have everything able to be changed during a render. You start the render, you change everything, and you don't have to restart. So that'll improve efficiency and enable workflows that weren't possible before. So some highlights that are just from RFK, RenderMan for Katana. We added support for multi-threaded traversal, which leads to faster time to first pixel and faster iterations, Hydra viewer support. So those lights that you see around in the viewer, they are the same ones in RFK that are available at Pixar. Light arrays that you saw Tim talk about, a great way to instance lights. A camera settings node, so everything that used to be a global setting is, there's a lot of those now that are just, you can set them on the camera. And then of course we added the preset browser, which was previously just in our RenderMan for Maya plugin, but now it's available in all of our bridge products, so that way you can share assets, share shading networks between all your different bridge plugins. Since then, we've kept working. We're not done yet, and we've added a lot of new features. Most importantly, we're continuing to improve interactivity by supporting interactive displacement and volumes, and also expanding our bridge plugins. So we added new Hydra delegate, a plugin for Mari, and a plugin for Houdini. So before I go further, I'm going to give you a quick demo of RenderMan for Katana in action. So this is a scene. We've got Duke Kaboom from Toy Story 4. He's Canada's greatest stuntman. He's going to try to jump through that hoop and fail spectacularly. But we're going to do a live render here, and hopefully it won't fail spectacularly either. So here we're rendering it with the monitor layer in the viewer, so that way we can get quick feedback. And I'll talk about what it takes to render. So everything here is coming in from USD. We've got the geometry and the shading all coming in with USD from another part of our pipeline. And what we're going to do in Katana is make it look good. So the first step of that is the integrator. We use Pixar path tracer as the basics. You can set your light samples here, but we also ship some other ones. This is Pixar occlusion, which gives you a quick occlusion pass. And then we have other ones like Pixar visualizer. That is basically just a GL sort of look, wireframe look. It's got some other features for debugging your normals and things. But pretty great. But we're going to go back to Pixar Path Tracer, which is the main one that you're going to use for your full lighting scenes. The PRMan Global Statements node is where you'll set options that are going to apply to the whole scene, and things like your multi-threaded traversal threads, stuff like that. PRMan Camera Settings is where we can do things like try to mimic a physical camera lens, but in CG. So here's the field of view. We can change it and make it really, really narrow, so that way it looks more like a toy, and adjust our focal length, so that way those spots in the background are nicely blurred. Pixar Camera has lots of options to mimic a physical camera. Things like tilt shift, lens distortion, and chromatic aberration, which is a favorite of mine because it makes some really funky pictures with lots of colors. But we're going to turn that off and do what Katana is known for, which is lighting. And so your lights are going to be created in Gaffer 3. The Gaffer, we've got 4 different lights: dome light with an HDRI, and 3 rect lights. So we're going to switch to the perspective mode, and it's really great because you can keep your GL and your monitor layer even if you switch cameras. We ship with different lights, and you can, in the Gaffer, you can mute a light to see what the contribution is to the scene without that light, or you can solo it to see what it looks like just with the dome light on, for example. The material tab in the Gaffer has lots of, you can see all of the settings like intensity or color temperature. So if we change that, we can get a warmer or cooler tone. But the other lights in the scene were already warm, so we're going to leave it where it was at. And then we can see about adding other lights. RenderMan ships with a bunch of light plugins, but everything in RenderMan is a plugin, so you can create your own or use the ones that we ship. Things like mesh lights, portal lights, all those things. But this scene already has lights, so what I'm going to do is add a light filter, which is something that will adjust the look of the lights without changing the light parameters directly. So this is a ramp light filter to go with the ramp that Duke Kaboom has. We're going to share that with all of the lights in the scene by just selecting all of them. And then you'll see that there's a light filter reference for each light in the scene. The ramp has a couple different modes, different types, but I want to affect the hoop that's in the scene. So I'm going to switch it to radial, which will give us like a circle shape. The ramp light filter has a float ramp that affects like the intensity from, you can fade from a light to a dark, or there's a color ramp, which will change the colors from one to the other. But for this scene, I just want to do color because it's more exciting. So we're going to just set the intensity all to 1 on the float ramp and change the color on the color ramp to something easily visible, like I'm going to make it blue in this case, since the scene is mostly reds. So as you can see, there's everything inside of that little circle there is white, and on the outside everything is blue. And now I want to place it in the middle of that hoop, and luckily Katana 3.6 provides a really easy way to do that with the new snapping tools. So I'm just going to select it on the object center, select the object that I want, and it brings it right there in the middle, which is really handy. Because now I just have to do a couple tiny adjustments and rotate it into place, and then it'll be where I want it to. Now to adjust the looks, so that way I've got the center. We offer manipulators for our different lights and light filters. So this one controls the end and the beginning, so the inside and the outside of the ramp, basically. So I'm going to move that, move it somewhere where I can see what's happening a little bit better. And then I'm going to adjust that so the inside edge of the ramp is on the inside edge of the hoop, and the outside edge of the ramp is on the outside edge of the hoop. And then with that, I can just fine-tune the fall off of the ramp a little bit, and you'll see that shows up in the geo manipulator. But we can just look at that and turn off. We'll go back to our main render cam to see what it looks like in context. And we can all switch that live when it works, and that's just great and fun to see. So if we turn off all our lights and take a look, yeah, it's pretty great, but as you can see, the whole scene is blue, and that might not be what I want. So say I just want the that hoop there to be this fall off from white to blue. So luckily, there's a linking tab, and just like light linking works, we also support that same concept on light filters. So we can just select the hoop objects right there directly and add those. And now the light filter is off of everything else and only affects that hoop. So it's working great. And just muting works on light filters just like it does on lights. So we can toggle and see what we've got. Pretty happy with that. Looks great. But the one thing I didn't show you yet is materials, because all of these came in directly from Katana or from USD. But we come with a preset browser that I talked about. You can either add light rigs or you can add materials. We ship with a bunch, but you can also create your own and save them. But in this case, I'm going to take a look and make it like a wooden launcher. So all I have to do is select those objects that I want to make a certain material and turn them wooden right there by just selecting them and putting that in my scene. So yeah, there we go. We've got a nice wooden launcher, and you can see Duke happily running off of his cool new wooden launcher. So that's basically the features for RenderMan for Katana. Just a basic overview, but since then we've added even more features with RenderMan 23. So I'm going to briefly cover the exciting new things, the Beyond section of the Onward and Beyond talk. So we've just released RenderMan 23.3 today, so you can go download that and check it out after this presentation. With it, we've got improved USD support, so we've put a lot of effort into our Hydra Render Delegate to support USD workflows. That's an area that's constantly changing and evolving as USD adds new features, so stay tuned on that for future releases. And we've continued to work on live render improvements for more interactivity. Specifically in RenderMan 23, it was around displays and resolution changes. So we have some examples of that. Interactive LPEs, you can just change your source for your LPE and it will update in the live render. So in this case, we can change our color channel from being diffuse to specular to the main color channel. And you can do all of that without having to even add a new display. But if you wanted to add a new display, we support that now too. So we've got all of these outputs that aren't in the scene, but if we wanted them to be, we can just add them and they'll show up in the scene. And if for some reason that then causes like your scene to slow down, there's too much memory usage, you can just turn them back off and you'll just be rendering with one display, and that's all live. The next things we saw a little bit of this in the other demo, but normally when you're interacting and scrubbing the timeline, RenderMan will just update it'll restart the buckets and you'll see that circle of buckets appear. But that might not be the most interactive, so we added this control called Decidither, and you'll see that it kind of progressively adds pixels from laying them over the next image. So it's kind of a dissolving effect, which can be really helpful for seeing where the final image is going to land before it's there. And finally, with this, we got interactive resolution. So this is an HD render, which is great for looking at details, but maybe not as great for scrubbing the timeline. So if you just want to see, like, what does it look like, the lighting with the animation, but I don't care quite as much about the resolution, you can change the resolution live, just like that, and get a faster playback and that sort of thing. It's really useful for tools that can interactively change resolution sizes, like a viewport scrubbing, that kind of thing. We also added to RenderMan for Katana a new debugging node. So this one is for PRMan signal visualizer, it's called. You can check out the different signals. You can isolate like the texture. You just have to select the object, any object in your scene, and you can see what does this texture look like, and then what do those two textures look like when they're blended together. And it gives you quick feedback and a great way to debug different shading material networks. And of course, there's more than I can possibly talk about in just this demo. So if you want to learn more, we've got a non-commercial RenderMan, which you can try. It's available it's fully functional. It's the same as you would get with RenderMan if you bought it, but you just get two licenses rather than more. It's free. It comes with all the bridge products, so you can use it, try it in all the parts of your pipeline before you bring it into Katana. And then once you do that, you can give our Shipshape art challenge a try. Best way to learn is to do. So we've got challenges, regular challenges, but this is our current one. It ends June 23rd. So if you're bored in quarantine, wherever you are, you can give it a try. And check back regularly if you don't have time right now, because there's more challenges all the time. So with that, I just want to say thanks, and we'll start our Q&A time. So yeah. I think Dylan from the RenderMan team is gonna come help with Q&A. Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know. Dylan's internet connection was a little spotty, so.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, just in case, I can step in. I don't, I'm not as charming as Dylan, but I'll give it a chance at being at least helpful here. So we've got a few in the questions section. There's a few technical questions that I don't know that we're prepped to be able to sort of demonstrate on the fly, but maybe you guys can sort of give some breadcrumbs for the guys to follow through on. So Joshua Selva asks, what would be the best way to get a holdout of lights coming from windows on a surface floor? What is the LPE formula? So that one, like I said, might not be the best one to answer live. But any sort of tips on LPEs in general, maybe sort of in terms of helping people figure out the formulas that they would use?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. You go.
Oh, well, we've got documentation for it. So if you need to look it up, you can check out the RenderMan docs. I think it's rmanwiki.pixar.com. Tim, do you have something?
Can you repeat the first part of the question? The holdout of lights, like just the signal of the lights coming through the window? Like,
it's on the top of the questions side. So if you look,
yeah, well, I guess like I might be misunderstanding the question, but like my first reaction was that like you could do that as a separate render path. It's probably the easiest way to do that. If you want to try to capture that in an LPE, if the light's passing through glass, you could like try to match the path of like light through glass to the whatever the set is or something. LPEs are tricky.
Yeah, but you could create like a light group, I guess. That's just for the
yeah and then match that, yeah, something like that. Yeah, I'm trying to answer the questions in chat too. I keep accidentally clicking the button that says I've replied when I haven't. So
yeah, there's a button, the little 3 dots you can use to edit the answer.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
If we have any other one, I think so far we've got most of the ones in the chat. Oh no, we got 2 more that just rolled in. All right. So Edgar asks, is there any news about RenderMan 24? Maybe something about the new features or an estimated date that you can share?
Defer to Sarah on that one.
Yeah, I guess I'll do that one. So RenderMan 24, we don't have an estimated date yet. Like we're thinking sometime this year probably. But new features, one interesting one is we've teamed up with Christos from Lollipop Shaders and are working on NPR. So non-photorealistic rendering, so toon looks and other things like that using his plugin, and that would all be things that you can use live while you're rendering as well. So rather than coming up with the toon look in comp, you could do it using these plugins in RenderMan directly. So that's a pretty cool thing that I think is coming.
Okay. Very cool. All right. I am sorry if I mispronounced the name. Nathawat has asked about the ACES workflow, and was that used on Coco, Toy Story 4, and Onward?
I don't know what the ACES workflow is.
Just the new ACES CG primaries, which are different from the sRGB primaries. So linear workflow for sure.
Oh, I guess not. If no, you're curious about like the color space that we're working in?
Yeah,
or?
yeah, it's basically color science question.
Oh, I see. I mean, the renders are in energy linear space, and then we use like lookup tables as far as the display. So the answer I think is no, not to the best of my knowledge.
Okay. And then don't know if you two can answer this one. How many time samples were being used in USD for getting for moving and deforming objects to get nice smooth motion blur? Question from Moritz.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know. That one I guess depends on your shot directly. I don't know, Tim, if you have specific numbers.
No, I don't know the specific numbers. I know that like the multi-sample stuff is usually done in cases where we spot like artifacts without using it. I don't think by default. I could be. This is not. I could be wrong, but I don't believe we're doing multi-sample by default. So
okay. Well, we can just say that probably
better up into the close, and then if for things like wheels and stuff like that, or really extreme motion, then multi-sampling would be turned on.
Yeah, probably a good question for the USD interest group to sort of dig into the details. But okay, and then Christoph has asked: is there any news on XPU?
Yeah, we're still working on it. We're targeting. I can't say exactly like when we're planning to release things, but it is still in progress, and lots of good new features being added to it.
Well, there's also that great presentation that was done for NVIDIA GTC that's online and available. So I think that's a great resource to
maybe
check
someone
out.
can share that link in the chat.
Okay. Right. So Valentin is asking, will there be RFK video content made by the RenderMan team to help for people learning?
Yes, I guess. We already have some in the docs. Oh, but you're asking specifically for video content?
Yeah.
Then maybe we can do more of that. This is a first step, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, interesting question for you, Tim. Rodrigo asks, how do you compare the artist's work experience from working previously with Pixar's in-house tools and now working with Katana?
I mean, I think at this point, like, we can do a lot of things that we couldn't do before. I think that it seems like on every film, the sort of level of complexity of the lighting is just going up and up and up. Like in the workflows that Katana offers in terms of being able to like support proceduralism in lighting is we never really had stuff like that in our older in-house tools. And so especially on shows like Coco and Toy Story 4, stuff like that, where there's huge or very large numbers of lights that are like animated and things like that, that stuff that would have been really, really difficult to support in our old tools. And we've never, like, the live rendering has never been better, right? So like I feel like it's a little tricky to answer that question, and that it's also sort of commenting on like moving from working, in a pre-GI world to a post-GI world and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's technical, big tech steps that took place all in sort of in sync with the move.
Yeah, I think that technically we can do things now that were very prohibitively difficult to do in the past, like comparing, so like doing lots of lights on a show like Cars versus a show like Katana, or a show like Onward. Actually, I was thrown off by the ACES question. Is that an HDR workflow? What is that? I'll look it up. But
Okay. So a couple of interesting questions then. Any insights that can be provided for dealing with denoising of hair and fur without losing detail?
Denoising is tricky. It does take a lot of fine tuning to figure out your settings sometimes. I don't know if I have exact answers.
Yeah, I think I feel like every show we're on, there's some new thing that's tricky to denoise that ends up being challenging. I feel like if we had stumbled on the magic bullet solution, we would share it.
Fair answer. Okay, so okay, we got a few more rolling in. So let's see. Anyone, can either of you comment on whether or not you are using volume schemas or importing VDBs in Katana, or volume schemas in USD versus importing VDBs?
I'm not aware of us having used a volume schema on Onward.
Right.
Yeah, I think that work is still in progress with the USD team actually. So probably importing plugins.
Yeah, I believe that's correct for Onward.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are set up in a very streamlined fashion where there's a lot of teams that sort of build and feed information through, so you guys get to spend your time focusing on lighting and solving the lighting specific challenges, correct?
In a perfect world, yeah. I mean, that's our goal, is that the lighting artists spend their time on the lighting and not sort of like debugging scene assembly issues and stuff. And we're getting I mean, it's I feel like it's a goal that you approach, but it's hard to totally get there. Like, but I feel like we're closer than we've ever been before. So, but awesome. that work definitely continues.
Okay, well, Jack has an interesting question for you, Tim. Does Pixar have any bespoke sequence lighting workflows or practices in Katana? Or does that sort of, I'm extending the question, does that change on the needs of a per show basis?
What was the question again? Can you repeat that?
The literal question is, does Pixar have a bespoke sequence lighting workflow in Katana? I extended the question to give some more context for folks of, does the sequence lighting workflow change on a show-by-show basis based on the team or the needs of the particular show?
So, yes, it does change. And like the way that the work is sort of like divvied out to different artists and stuff like that may change show to show. Usually that's a function of the calendar, you know, how much time we have to work with and that sort of thing. We do have like a pretty standard kind of rough defined workflow where our Katana graph is based on live groups. And so we're generally working rough define, like literally like building lighting rigs that are inherited by every shot in the show versus and then layering lighting rigs that are inherited by every shot in the sequence, and then layering in lighting rigs that are, you know, shot specific. So and that stays consistent like that. The kind of the spine of our Katana graph has been pretty consistent for the last several shows. But the way like a particular sequence is approached will vary show to show.
Okay, great. All right, so another interesting question for you, Tim. Someone's trying to learn more about lighting and just saw the movie. So they say, I saw Onward yesterday. Great movie, as always, from you guys. Could you recommend a scene to make a study or portfolio piece matching the lighting or style specifically as a lighting artist? So kind of like animators do voiceover bits. How could they do the same thing with lighting? What would you recommend from the show?
Oh, I feel like you're asking me to pick a favorite or something. That's no, I think, you know, like a couple that jump to mind for me are I think the bigger man sequence, which is when Ian does the magic where he tries to make the gas can grow larger. I'm spoiling the movie for anyone who hasn't seen it. And it goes sideways. Like, I think the lighting in that sequence is really nice, and that there's kind of there's an overall mood that's established. The action reads really clearly. The characters look appealing, and there's like exciting dynamic light from the magic spell. And then, you know, on the other end of the spectrum, I think the lighting when Ian is kind of at his desk looking up at the photos of his family memories on the wall, and it's a much quieter moment. It's kind of a really subtle, I think the lighting is very beautiful. It's a really like, there's not a whole lot of action in the frame, but it's really kind of satisfying to look at because I think it's really nicely lit. So maybe those two. But okay. I would hope as a Pixar lighting artist that, you know, any scene from the movie could be taken as an example of good CG lighting. But
or maybe let's extend this question a bit. What would you look for in a lighting artist demo reel that this person should take into consideration? So what's your aha moment where you would want to hire somebody?
So, I mean, I think as a lighting artist, there are a set of like responsibilities or concerns that we have as far as, you know, what we're contributing to the filmmaking. I mean, and some of them are pragmatic as far as like, every shot is in the movie for a reason. Every shot has a story point. There's some piece of information that has to be communicated to the audience so that they understand what will happen next. And sometimes that can be really like, that can seem kind of, you know, not that exciting, like the character moves from point A to point B, but like, that's what has to get through in that shot. So I think, you know, one of our biggest goals is just to make sure that information is communicated to the audience. And then I would layer on top of that, you know, looking like a character that looks appealing, or like that assuming the character should look appealing. If it's like a scary monster or something like that, then maybe not appealing. But being able to understand the shape and form of the character or the subject of the shot is really important. I think that, you know, lighting like that really successfully communicates like time of day and mood and stuff like that is really important. So I think, you know, any of those things, like, or any and all of those things are important concerns.
Okay. So Frederick has a sort of parallel question to this, which is, what would you recommend to someone looking to go from VFX focused lighting to more of animation based lighting? So if they spend their life sort of, or their career matching plates up to now, what do you think are the things that they need to refocus on to become a better animation lighter?
Well, I think, you know, like, I mean, matching plates, I feel like the big goal there is integration, right? It's just to make sure that like the elements that you're adding look like they belong in the scene. And I think that is, you know, that can be important too, but for animation, for a Pixar, it's really more about story point and appeal, and like clarity, and emotionally supporting the story. Again, the story point. So I think we probably spend more time kind of carefully shaping our characters than we would if the goal was just to make things look integrated, because, you know, in a fully CG world, you can turn on GI and things kind of look integrated out of the box, right? Like, but that's we just barely start there. Like, most of the work that we do is about the kind of crafting to camera for each shot, and most of that time is spent on making sure the characters look appealing, like they're well shaped. You can understand the form of them. You can understand what the materials are, those sorts of things.
Yeah, and you'd probably, like, would you say that, like, actually digging into the work of many cinematographers, I think there's a lot of great resources out there now. If people haven't seen, Roger Deakins has been hosting a great podcast where he talks about a lot of his cinematography. You guys worked with Roger on Wall-E, and you know, in my experience, that's a great place to start, because they're definitely unless it's documentary filmmaking, there's some kind of opinion and aesthetic that's being forced on it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. So another question for you: what amount of time gets spent on key lighting a shot?
I mean, it depends. Again, our workflow, like different shots, depending on the content of the shot, will take, you know, different amounts of time to finish, obviously. So it depends on, it really varies shot to shot. Some setups, again, we generally work in kind of a rough defined process where there's a pass that a master lighting pass, which is a lighting rig or pass that's done, a rig that's built to support a particular environment or sequence. And so there's a block of work that goes into that. And then some shows are lit, an individual lighter might light the entire sequence. And some shows, like, and again, this depends a lot on the calendar. Like some shows, once that master lighting pass is done, shots might be sort of packeted into similar camera angles and then assigned out to different shot lighting artists. And so the sum of the work, it's hard to give a one-size-fits-all answer, which feels like a little bit like an evasive answer, but otherwise, I think if I were to give you a number, I don't know that it would be that meaningful.
Well, I guess maybe I can split that question out a bit more. Do you find in your current combination of RenderMan and Katana that you have more time to focus on key shots and refining them because you can amortize those benefits across the sub shots?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to repeat that one more time. I think, I mean, our workflow is such that like every shot is a key shot. So like our inheritance-based workflow, yeah, obviously, like we're not duplicating work, but I guess I'm still not totally clear what you're asking. But.
Well, no, a lot of the common conceptions around sequence-based lighting are that you put more work in at the beginning, so the master lighting, then to the key shot lighting, and then each shot subsequently needs less and less polish. So, or I wouldn't say less polish, needs less effort to reach the last 20% in the sort of 80-20 rule. So I guess partly what you could extrapolate the question that the gentleman was asking was, what impact does the key lighting have in that total process? And it sounds like from your answer that there's a lot of work that goes into making sure that every single shot is polished so to a certain degree, there is no free ride in the inheritance model. There's a lot, still craftsmanship that goes into every single shot.
Yeah, I think we shot light every shot. I mean, it's absolutely true that in sequences where we can put in a lot of work up front and then a lot of stuff like holds up all the way through, like we do that. I think it just, again, it kind of varies sequence to sequence. So like a sequence like the one I mentioned before of Ian kind of like when he's looking at the tape recorder and stuff like that sequence, that's going to be very different than say the dragon fight at the end, where it's a sequence, but in every shot you're looking in a different direction and like there's different effects and things like that. So I mean, like sequences that lend themselves to sort of like to to being approached more like as a sequence, we would obviously do that, but it's like not every, like the material kind of dictates the approach.
Cool. All right. So Phrase has a question, but it probably sounds more like a compliment. Dawood says that I noticed that RenderMan is very stable in Maya. How did you guys do it? So I think that's actually not so much of a question, but more of a compliment to the RenderMan team.
Thank you. Yeah, we worked hard with RenderMan 22 to get really stable live rendering and to make it so that way we can change things and not have things crash. So yeah, thanks.
Okay, I think we've got 2 questions left, and then we're basically out of time. But Patrick was wondering about the size of lighting teams at Pixar. What does it take? What small army is lighting movies at Pixar these days?
It depends. Like on I think it's usually between 30 and 40 at the peak of a show. You know, but it will depend on the show and like how much time they have and stuff like that. Like shows that have a kind of a longer, leaner calendar might have smaller teams, and shows that are a little more crunched might have bigger teams. And so it depends on the calendar, and it depends on like not just the sort of like how lighting wants to approach the show, but how like the show has been technically structured. Onward, I should have double checked. I want to say we had probably 35 lighters or so ish, but not everyone is on the show for the whole run. Like usually, the director of photography will be on very early, doing like design work and sort of like brainstorming with the director and the art designer, and then like leads will come onto the show to start doing that foundational work again, because our lighting kind of paradigm pipeline workflow is such that like we build a set of assets at the unit level and then like sort of like sequence specific assets. So the leads might come on to start building the foundation show level lighting rigs and getting various like tools and things in place. And then like more and more people will come on until there's a kind of a crunch at the end and that's usually when the lighting team might peak, like it's say 35, 40, maybe 45 others.
Cool. All right. All right. So last question, throw this one to you, Sarah. Can you advise any books and articles about lighting and materials, specifically about modifying BSDF shaders for Pixar-like styles? So if someone wants to get into more shader writing, what are some good modern resources for them?
Sure. So we ship all of our plugins with RenderMan. So one good place if you're looking to do that is just to look at the source code. You can write shaders pretty easily with OSL. So I recommend looking into their documentation as well. Yeah, check out all of our docs, the RenderMan docs. We've got developer-specific docs if you want to write like a BSDF as well. And yeah, mostly you can take a look at our C++ BXDFs that we ship. And yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we've run the course of our hour this evening. I wanted to say thank you to Tim and to Sarah for giving us their evening, or this, I guess, their morning.
It's morning
evening.
Yeah.
And for the effort they put into preparing their presentations and giving them. So thank you very much, guys. And for everybody else, this will be on repeat, and our marketing team will email you later about how you can find out more about these sessions or have further access to this session. And there are a few more questions that are in the session, but we'll try and answer those offline. And those of you that have been tuning into the virtual events, please keep coming back. We've got a full calendar scheduled for you, all the various different products and guests and things like that. So thank you very much. and have a great day, great night, wherever you are.
Thank you.